Welcome back to the 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show. My name is Wayne Kimmel, managing partner of 76 Capital, the sports tech venture capital company. On this show, I interview top sports entrepreneurs, athletes, and executives who are shaping and many times changing the sports industry. We have put together a series of shows to dive into the transformation and professionalization of college sports. My guest host is Ken Shropshire, the man who wrote the book on sports business. You probably know Ken from his several decades of running the Wharton Sports Business Program at the University of Pennsylvania and leading the Global Sport Institute at Arizona State University. Please subscribe to our show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our 76 Capital website to never miss an episode. Welcome back to our 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show, the College Sports Series. Our guest is Adam Breneman, a former tight end at Penn State and at UMass, and who later became the youngest Power 5 position coach at Arizona State before transitioning to sports media and entrepreneurship. Currently, Adam is this college sports analyst on CBS Sports, host of the Next Up podcast with Front Office Sports. Got to catch that show. Co-founder of the College Sports Company, and recently named to the Forbes 30 Under 30 media list. Adam, welcome to the 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show.
Appreciate you guys having me on. I love what you're doing with this show and excited to be a guest.
Well, it's great to have you on the show. And Ken and I have really enjoyed all of our conversations across this series and really talking about all the things that are happening across the college sports world today. And you're right in the middle of it all. So we'd love to kind of maybe just start off with just your initial thoughts about what's been happening and where you think things are going to go.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to dive into. I'd say this. I think we've seen in college sports, college football is really the lens that I view college sports from, but just based on my day-to-day. We have seen consistently the professionalization and the nationalization of college sports. It has been a thing now for the last few years. I mean, you think back to when it really, I feel like, started from a nationalization standpoint was the Big Ten bringing in USC and UCLA and Oregon and Washington to the conference. And I felt like that was a pivotal moment where people said, okay, this is about TV revenue. This is about media money. And it's no longer about conferences and playing your rivalry school in your backyard. They will do, these media companies and the conferences will do whatever it takes to put the best product on the field, and which created the nationalization of college sports and college football. Then you have NIL and the transfer portal, which I think each of them by themselves would have been a big move in college sports, but to have them combined at the same time, you had NIL and transfer portal come to college sports really in the same period of 12 months or 24 months, created a chaotic ecosystem. At the same time, though, college sports has been a business for a lot of people for a long time. It's been a business for the administrators and the coaches and the media companies and the concession companies and the donors, but it has not been a business for the players. And I think it's time that it's become a business for the players. Like anything in life, when things correct, sometimes they have a tendency to overcorrect. So I think we have overcorrected in the benefit of the players, and I think that's all getting leveled out right now. But overall, a lot of changes in college sports. I think it's a good thing. And if you're a fan of the athletes and you like college sports, the product we've seen on the field has never been better. College football has never been more popular. The product is amazing. TV ratings are better than ever. And I think football itself in college football has shown to be really the premier college sport in America. And all these changes, they have a lot of negativity around them. It's really been a good thing for the sport overall.
Adam, it's great to have you for so many reasons. One is that you're so much closer in time to the reality of all this than certainly me. Wayne's a young guy, but and I try to get myself out of my old guy frame of mind in thinking about this. But
did you guys have face masks on your helmet?
Well, it doesn't attach to leather very well, so it doesn't. That's the problem. No comments on the face. I see where you're trying to go there.
That's good.
I like that. But I'm thinking about the coaches, the players, and the media. I mean, all these spaces that you touch. Well, let's start with the coaches. A lot of what we've been trying to do is pull out best practices and how should you operate in this new environment, what's being done right, what's being done wrong. So the coaches now have this, and we can stick with football primarily too, because it is different in different sports. But you got this war chest of money, depending on how you're allowed to spend it. But if you do have freedom, what's a good path for operation to keep the players and keep the locker room in hand, to not lose the locker room using it the wrong way?
Yeah, it's a good question. The biggest problem with the portal and NIL and where you come to lose the locker room, in my opinion, is not necessarily the guys on your own team. It's what happens when you bring in a player from the outside, comes into your locker room on a new NIL deal, and everyone on the team knows what that guy got paid.
Right.
College football is a different beast, and every other sport right now, because in the NFL it's a little bit different. You have a lot of the money is slated based on where you got drafted, based on your rookie deal. It's very public. Everyone knows what everyone's getting paid. Everyone knows how many years are left on each other's contracts. It's a very transparent world in the NFL and in the NBA. In college football, no one really knows what everyone's making. I mean, you see the headlines, but no one really knows. Like, do we actually know what Arch Manning's making? We have no clue. We can guess. We can look at his on-3 NIL valuation. We don't actually know. So what happens, and I've seen this happen time after time at schools, you have players on the team that are making good money, but not making what they would be worth if they hit the transfer portal. That's another issue in college sports. A player is just worth more money when they're in the portal versus if they stay at their current school. That's the nature of negotiation. You have leverage when you're in the portal, so you get way more money. So guys are on the current team. They might have just had a really good season. He gets a bump in NIL. Let's say he gets a bump, just to throw numbers out. He's a starting wide receiver at a Big Ten school, has a good season, goes from making $200,000 to $230,000 this coming in his senior year. A ton of money. I mean, good for him. He's 18 years old. He's 19 years old. But what happens is, well, that school needs to go get other good players, so they go poach a player from a rival Big Ten school who's a great receiver to come on the team. The two guys are still going to be starters, but now there's another receiver in the room. But that guy who's making $230,000 hears that they're paying the guy from the other Big Ten school $450,000 to come to his school, and he hears that in the locker room. And the coaches weren't transparent about it. The other players are just hearing the rumblings of it, and then the guy on the current team says, "Well, what? I just had 50 catches last year. Why is that guy making $450,000 and I'm making $230,000?" So then they go back to the coach and say, "Well, I need $430,000. I'm worth more than that guy." And you get into this. Well, the reality is the other guy was worth more because he was in the portal, because he had leverage. You didn't have any leverage. You stayed at the school to the current guy. So you get into this system where guys are disincentivized to stay at their school financially. They're incentivized to go hit the portal, see what's out there, make more money. And then you get into this system where it's not super transparent, and coaches are having to have really tough conversations, and it creates turmoil in the locker room. I mean, another example is with the transfer portal, without contracts, coaches are not incentivized to be honest with their players. Now, I do think most coaches are good people, but they have obligations to do the best thing for their program. So if you have a coach, there's quarterback battles all around the country right now in college football. You look at schools, tons of them have deep quarterback battles that were going on in spring practice. Well, if there's a quarterback competition in spring practice and you need both those quarterbacks on your team, the transfer portal opens after spring practice. So why the hell would a coach name the starting quarterback during spring practice before the transfer portal? He's going to wait to name the starter until summer camp comes so that he has both players on his team in case one gets hurt. So there's a lot of things in the current system that don't incentivize transparency or honesty from coaches, or a level playing field when it comes to money and revenue, the lack of contracts, the fact that there's 2 transfer portal windows right now. I think it puts everyone in really tough spots where there's not everyone's aligned. And when there's a lack of transparency, it creates animosity in a locker room. And I think the coaches, the best ones, are trying to figure out how to navigate that every day. And some of the systems and the rules we put in place that college football and college sports has put in place has put people in tough positions where they have to be they're almost forced into being relatively dishonest about some things in their programs.
So Wayne, let me ask you just a quick follow-up. Have you seen any coaches or talked to any coaches that are going to start being more transparent, that are going to say, what the hell, I might as well just post up salaries, and or if that's, all these college sports protection privacy rules, is that something they can even do?
Yeah, I haven't. I'll say this. I think that with revenue sharing coming in college sports now here, where the schools are paying the athletes directly, I think there will be more transparency. I think the contracts will be more open. It will be talked about more freely and openly. Part of the issue for a while, Ken, was the coaches were definitely making decisions on how much players got paid, but they weren't allowed to technically. I mean, these were NIL collectives that were paying the players. So let me set the scene. Here's what would happen. The NIL collective is an outside entity from the school. No affiliation, not allowed to be owned by the school, not allowed to be affiliated. I mean, I guess there can be like quasi affiliation, but not officially a part of the school. Would be the ones who actually are executing the contracts and paying the players that are playing at the school. But the person who's in charge of telling the NIL collectives how much to pay each player was the head coach and the general manager of the school. So you have the head coach and the general manager who are trying to recruit and trying to get players on their team would agree to deals, would say handshake agreements to a running back. Hey, yeah, we'll pay you $200,000. Come here, and then we'll get you a $200K deal with our NIL collective. The amount of times I heard NIL collective directors complain about this because the coaches would agree to deals that the collective didn't have the money to pay. So the collective was then trying to raise money and get this done, but the reality is the coach in the school and the program weren't the ones signing the contract. It was the collective. And we saw the lawsuit with Jaden Rashada, the Florida quarterback who transferred and sued Billy Napier, the head coach at Florida, sued him. And I don't know the exact details of the lawsuit, but basically sued Florida because he said, I was promised this money by the head coach that the NIL collective would pay it. And then the collective fell apart and never paid him. Well, who's on the hook for that? So it was a mess for a long time because of the collective and the coach relationship. Now with revenue sharing coming, where the schools can openly and honestly pay the players, it will lead to more transparency, I believe, and I hope in the future.
Adam, it's been really great to watch and listen to your Next Up podcast that you do on Front Office Sports, and you've interviewed so many head football coaches. I mean, what are some of the things that they've told you, or what are some of the things that maybe you've learned from them that have been really kind of eye openers?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I admire a lot of these coaches a ton. I mean, it's always cool to be in those rooms and sit down with the head coach for an hour and talk about their career and their life and their journey, because those aren't the interviews they do a whole lot. And I think I always appreciate it. I think it's the fact that I have that background and I coached for a little bit and they trust me to come in there and open up with a little bit. I always am amazed at the level of detail that these coaches put into every single piece of their career, their life, and their program. I mean, I remember being at Oregon and watching Dan Lanning their head coach, watching Dan Lanning interact with his players and the program. And even as he prepared for our interview, there wasn't a thing that wasn't thought about or noticed. I mean, as much as like the couches that were used for the interview, what people are wearing in the background, the timing of things, the schedule for the day. I was just like, the amount of detail that goes into these programs and these head coaches, what they think about, they're just different. They're built different, or they wouldn't be where they're at. You know this, Wayne. I know James Franklin really well at Penn State. I said this to him in my interview, I've been amazed at how Coach Franklin knows and sees everything. I'm like, how'd you see that? I'm like, he notices and picks up on and has an understanding of every part of the program. And some will call it micromanagement, but I think it's a balance of like, ultimately the head coach is responsible, and the margin of error is so small. Think about a place like Penn State. Penn State is just an one or two inches here or there away from winning a national title last year or being in the national championship game. They're also a couple plays away from not having a great season. The margin of error is so small and the obsession is so high from these head coaches that it sometimes catches me off guard, or I get reminded of what commitment really looks like at that level. And it is a 24/7 living and breathing thing that everything matters. There's not a single thing that does not matter to these coaches, and the great ones are amazing at balancing all the different pieces. And a guy like Coach Franklin, a guy like Shane Beamer at South Carolina, a guy like Jed Fish at Washington, like they can be super high level and set the vision for the organization, but also make sure that the recruiting intern showed up at time that day, and make sure that the cafeteria staff was serving the right portion for the players, and also make sure that the equipment staff had the right size ball bag out there that day that made it the best for the program to have that practice. I mean, the amount of work and the amount of detail always amazes me. There goes my microphone. Always amazes me. So it's always crazy to see those guys operate in person.
So this is out now, old news, but it struck me at the time, and I guess it's more important now than ever. The Caleb Williams, gets the Beats by Dre deal, and I got to give everybody in my team some Beats by Dre. Everybody's got to get some headphones.
Yeah.
Both as a player, I mean, do you need to be thinking about that? Do you need to be thinking about spreading the wealth if you're the guy on the team? And I also wonder, as a coach, if that's something you talk to your players about, especially the star lead players that will get the outside the 20.5. They'll get their special deals should they incorporate their teammates.
Yeah, I think it's something that we've seen in sports in general. A lot of times the star players who get a lot of the money and the attention and the brand deals spread the wealth with all the players that contribute, but maybe not don't make as much money, or their deals aren't as big, or their brand deals aren't as prevalent. Think about some of the quarterbacks, getting gifts for their offensive line and things like that. I think that's something that has been around for a while, but I do think there's this notion, or there's this desire for big time college quarterbacks specifically, and those are the ones that's who makes the most money, to constantly be thinking about their teammates and be very conscious of their appearance publicly in how they handle their NIL money. I think there's a big trend towards that, because you're always in this balance. I mean, you guys know in football, if you're not focused 100% on playing football, you can kind of get into this trap of being perceived as someone who's not a ball guy. He's way too worried about his NIL deals. At the FOS event, Huddle in the Hamptons, Ryan Clark talked about this, Wayne. I know you were there. Ryan Clark talked about it on the stage, about how 10 years ago, if you were doing investments or brand deals or commercials, your teammates and the owners would not have been too happy with you. Now, it's much more common. I think about this all the time. Like, if I would have told Bill O'Brien, who I played for at Penn State, or James Franklin 10 years ago that I wanted to start a podcast when I was playing football at Penn State, I would have been laughed out of the room. Like, it never would have happened. I mean, it would have been like, what do you mean? Like, you can't even get your plays right on third down. You're not starting a podcast. And now it's much more common, and it's much more accepted. And I think it's a good thing for the sport, for the athletes, because now is the time to be doing things like you just said, Ken, to be sharing, to doing the Beats by Dre deal for Caleb Williams, and to be doing brand deals as an athlete anywhere in the country. The truth for a lot of these players is that they may never again be as relevant as they are right now to the public. This may be the biggest opportunity they have to make money, to to gain a following on social media, to use that stardom to your advantage, to build a career, to build a path. So one of my biggest regrets is I didn't start creating content sooner. I wish I would have done it when I was playing, but I waited till I was done. And I'll tell you one thing, it's a little bit harder to get people to pick up your phone call when you're not playing anymore. It's a little bit harder to to schedule that meeting, or to get that job, or to close that deal when you no longer have that jersey on.
Yeah,
So
wait till you're my age. Don't talk about that now.
but you know what I'm saying. When you're a current athlete, you have some juice that you don't have anymore. So I think it's something that I encourage athletes to do. Whatever the deal is, like do as much as you can, because this is a position you might not be in for very long.
I mean, you have a really unique position in the game today, right? And all the different things that you're doing now. This is what, season 2 or 3 for being on CBS.
Yeah, season 2 on CBS, about 2.5. I kind of dabbled in it a few years ago, and last season was my first full year, and then just re-signed a new 2-year deal with CBS like last week. So excited about that.
Well, congratulations on that. It's amazing. And, so how have your experiences, right, as a player, right, as a coach, now in this new world, are you calling games differently because of the way that, you're talking more business on the game than compared to the past?
There's definitely a new element to calling games with the transfer portal, with NIL. I don't know if it's necessarily a business lens. My job as a broadcaster, as an analyst, is to break down the game and translate it to the viewer. But there is an added element. There is there's things in broadcast. It's interesting because I think this is a great conversation, Wayne. I'm glad you bring it up, because in broadcasting, there's kind of things that you talk about and don't talk about. You got like NIL payments. Like, we don't really talk about what a guy's getting paid on the broadcast, but everyone at home's thinking about it. So I've often thought, like, why are we not talking about that? If a player has a big contract and he's not playing well, that's talked about if it's an NFL game. Why are we not talking about that in college? And also, and some people would say, well, they're kids. Well, to me, if they're 18 years old and they're making $1 million a year, I don't think we classify them in kid category anymore, right? That comes with the territory. I think the other thing that's really interesting is sports betting. I mean, sports betting has become such a big part of the sports ecosystem, including college, professional, every sport. I mean, in essentially every company in sports has some kind of affiliation with sports betting, whether it's events, whether it's media, whether it's sports teams and leagues and properties. They all have, or they want to have, some kind of affiliation or deal with a sports book or a daily fantasy or one of these companies. And I know 76 Capital has been involved in that industry for a while. I think how this translates to on-air broadcasts will be interesting. Like this season, I'll tell you one thing, like there won't be any sports betting talk on air. Like that doesn't happen. You don't talk about sports betting. You don't talk about the lines. But in 3 years from now, I don't know if I can say I'm confident that won't change. I think that there will be this world where at some point you're almost ignoring the obvious, that everyone who watches this game is worried and curious about what the line is. What's the spread? What's the over-under? How many yards is the quarterback's prop for that game? And I think it's almost at some point becomes like, why are we not talking about it? Like, why, if this field goal isn't a game-winning field goal, but it does change the betting outcome. The spread's 7 and this takes it to a 6-point lead. Like, we should talk about that on air, because I guarantee you half the people watching have a bet on the game. So with how prevalent sports betting is, how prevalent NIL is, I think we'll see it change how broadcasting goes about it. Not any time in the next 12 months, but I think it will as the years go on, because it's such a big part of the sports ecosystem.
I think that's fascinating. I hadn't really paid attention in that way. You guys talk about as broadcasters, players transferred from. You'll say a player was in the portal, that sort of thing, but you haven't talked about, and make sure I'm hearing this clearly, you haven't talked about what they got to get there. Part of it because it was still kind of gray last year.
Yeah.
This season, I mean, unlike the betting, I mean, it would seem like this season more of that could be out there, and maybe it's next season when we really have the reports coming in from the NIL goal and all that sort of stuff. But you think that's coming before betting, though? I mean, for sure.
No doubt. Yeah, I'm probably. Yeah, I think
you might even slip and say something this year, which.
Yeah, I may slip up, and we'll be talking NIL. I'll be talking NIL on there. I think betting's certainly more taboo than NIL is. Yeah. I think that's probably a few years out. It's something that I know people talk about. I bet you behind closed doors, every network in the country is talking about how do we handle sports betting. I mean, Just look at ESPN. ESPN has a sports book that with their name on it. Why are the analysts at ESPN not talking about the ESPN bet lines on this game while they're on air calling a game? But NIL, I definitely think, to your point, it's probably been it's less about the taboo piece of it and more about no one really knows what a player is actually getting paid and no one and who's actually paying the player. Now with revenue sharing, you can actually say school X is paying this player $300,000. And we know that's what it is. So I think that'll be interesting to see how it affects the coverage of college sports.
When you think about today's player and how much they have to deal with, right? Think maybe kind of take yourself back, and I mean, like you had to worry about football, as you were saying before. You had to make sure you had to, your routes and you know what you're supposed to do on the field, and then you also have to do your homework and kind of get grades. Right now, there's so much more. It's the content. It's the podcast. It's should I transfer? How much am I getting? What other people are getting? Is this my year to come out? Like what? There's just so much. Are you going to go to the next level? Like what should you do? Should I stay or not stay? Like, how do you figure that all out today as a current player?
Well, I mean, the truth is that academics are at the bottom of the list of priorities for athletes in 2025. I'm not saying they should be, but if we're going to sit here and still call star athletes at schools, quote unquote, student athletes, I think that's in a la land that we want to be in college sports. And I think one of the things that the NCAA has tried to frame us with is that these athletes are student athletes. A lot of them, some of them are, and it's a priority. But for a lot of these guys that are making multiple 6 figures, 7 figures a year, school is not the priority for them. And that's just the truth. And I think one of the biggest issues we've had in college sports is the refusal, the absolute refusal to call athletes what they are, which is employees of the school. And we have called them student athletes instead. There is no doubt in football season at some of the biggest programs in the country that there is that the mindset is not school first in those programs. I've been in them. It isn't. It is minimum requirement we can possibly do to spend the most amount of time in the football building. And again, I'm not saying that's right, but I think it is a reality that we need to accept in college sports, and goes back to the fact that the notion that these players got free school and that was all they deserved, when the media companies and the schools made hundreds and hundreds and millions and probably billions of dollars on the athletes, it was not okay. And I think it's another reason why NIL and where we're at now and revenue sharing needed to come to college sports. I'm a massive fan and a big believer in the value of education in college. I think it's a big part of my career. I got my MBA for free playing football. I mean, I took advantage of it to the top degree you could. But I do think that the times have changed, and I still think guys should prioritize it. But when you have 7 figures for a lot of these guys, I mean, there's a lot of starters at Power 4 schools making 7 figures annually now at these programs. It is tough to tell that player that your priority should be school right now. I'm not sure mine would have been. I think it is life-changing money that they may not have a chance to make again. You never know how long your career is going to be. And it is a lot of that time maximizing how much money you can actually make for your family in the future. And guys aren't making decisions based on what degree they can get at what school. It's who's going to pay me the most amount of money where I can protect my family and move forward. And I think about it all the time. Like if I was talking to Jeff Monken, head coach at Army. I call a lot of the Army games on CBS. So I've got to know Coach Monken well. They had a star running back last year, Kanye Udoh, who transferred from Army. I'm forgetting what school he went to, but he went to a Power 4 program. And rumor has it made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in this transfer. And Coach Monken said, it's a balance, because he said, I know the best thing for him academically and for his future is to be at West Point and to get his degree from West Point. But at the same time, he's a kid, from not a great area who's going to go make life-changing money, more money than his family's ever seen. He's like, part of me wants to get up and shake his hand and say, congratulations, go do it. And it's this like constant pool of what is best short-term versus long-term, money versus academics. And I think we need to get to a frame point in especially Power 4 major revenue driving sports where players are making a lot of money, where they are employees of the school. They are held to obligations that they should be held to as an employee. You have contracts. You can't break your contract or you owe a penalty. I mean, that's just like normal contract law. You have to show up on time. You have to play in the bowl game. You have to do these certain things to get paid by the school. And yes, you can get an education, but the notion that is the most important thing and the value, and that's the value for the athlete, I think is one of the reasons we got to a tough place where we are in college sports. And the sooner that we accept reality of where things are and where things are headed, I think the sooner we'll actually get to a place where the academics can actually get back to being an important part, but just not framed as like, I feel like academics was almost weaponized in the place of college athletics and used against the athletes to keep them from getting paid. And I think the more we get back to being in a place where we can use academics the right way and it can be encouraged, we'll be in a better place for college sports.
Yeah, I love that you brought it back to the academic piece. And I just, again, to personalize, I always think about how much my life would have been just a disaster had somebody not pulled me aside and said, go get that degree. You're really not that good. I mean, that kind of focus, it's hard to listen to if somebody's paying you $1 million a year. It's hard to understand that life is a long journey. So my last question, how do we give, or what should parents do? They got the great high school athlete that's getting recruited everywhere. What kind of team can a parent that's not, the master lawyer or whatever else, what kind of, if you've thought about it, what kind of team could that parent begin to put in place? And also, the structure to think about how do you pay whatever professionals you put in place, because you may not have the funds in your bank account at that moment. Have you given any thought to that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. There has been certainly because of the lack of regulation around college sports agents right now, there has been almost a predator approach to a lot of these NIL representatives, agents in the sport or in college sports. There's no, in the NFL, NBA, that these agents need to be lawyers and get their agent's license and register with the NFLPA. And there's a lot of regulation around it to make sure the players are taken care of. That's not the case in college sports right now. Now, there's been talk about changing the regulation where you have to be a real agent to represent college athletes. But I think, Ken, to your question, there needs to be on an athlete's team, if you're a big-time athlete and you think that you're going to be recruited all over the country and have opportunities to make money, really, I would view agents in two different categories. One, you have a contract negotiating agent who is working on your deal, your revenue sharing deal, or your collective deal that pays you your salary to go to that school. Right. That agent should be getting probably 3% of the deal and not 20%, which is what a lot of these agents tried to get players, because 20% is market rate usually for marketing deal commissions for agents. But that is different than a guaranteed contract that they're negotiating that you were going to get no matter what, that the agent didn't source for you. So an agent should get around 3%, maybe 4, maybe 2, depending on how big the deal is, to negotiate an actual revenue sharing deal with the school. Real true marketing deals, that's where you hire an agent and say, agent, you go get me a deal with the car dealership. I'll pay you 20%. I'll pay you 15% for sourcing that deal. That's fair. I pay an agent 20% when they bring me deals. I pay, and I have different people. Hey, I'll pay you 10% if you close a deal with that company to sponsor the podcast. Like, that's normal. But that's different than contract negotiating, revenue sharing agreements. So segmenting those two are very important for athletes, for their families. And the scary part is, guys, this, like, there's some parents who haven't dealt with this before and don't know. They're being told 20% is the market rate. Well, they're paying 20% of their contract that they were going to get anyway to an agent who's essentially preying on a young man in their family. And I think, just having people around you as an athlete to tell you the truth, whether it's a high school coach, whether it's a trainer, that you get in this trap of everyone telling you how great you are for a long time. And I think having people that can bring it down to earth is important. So whoever that is, whether it's an uncle, whether it's a coach, whether it's a family member, having someone in the system who can remind a player that, listen, yeah, every high school, every college in the country just offered you, but you haven't done anything yet in college. I remember when I got to Penn State, I had a bad day of practice and I was moping around, and Coach O'Brien said to me, I was a freshman, and he's like, Adam, how many catches have you caught so far at Penn State? And I was like, 0. He's like, remember that. He's like, and you won't ever catch one if you keep acting like that. You know, like, it's people that tell you things like that remind you, hey, you might have been a 5-star in high school. You may be making $300,000 a year at college, but you haven't done shit. You're a freshman and haven't even played. Like, start acting like.
Don't get worked up now. I see we kind of hit.
I'm starting to get fired up. But, I think someone like that in their corner is important.
That's great,
because you just don't want people to get over their skis when they're too young. You know.
Well, Adam, it's been awesome having you on our 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show at our college sports edition. And, you know, as we wrap up here, I mean, you've just given us so many different gems in the last half hour. Really appreciate everything that you've shared with us. And, you know, it is the Sports Leadership Show. One of the things that we continuously have heard over and over again is, where is the leadership in college sports? Who will be that leader? Is there a need for a leader? How do you see this shaping up?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues in college sports, college football, again, from my lens, is the lack of leadership. If I asked you who's in charge of college football, I don't think you guys would be able to both give me the same answer. Who's in charge? Who's in charge of college basketball? Is it the NCAA? Is it? I mean, I would argue that Greg Sankey's in charge of college football, the SEC commissioner, or the Big Ten commissioner. But the issue is that these people who are in charge of college football or college basketball, they're also in charge of every other sport. Greg Sankey probably is the most important person in college football, the SEC commissioner, but he's also in charge of swimming and diving and lacrosse and women's basketball and soccer and college football. So there's no one who actually looks out for college football or college basketball or whatever the sport is itself. So I think there's definitely a need for a college football commissioner, a college basketball commissioner to look out for what's in the best interest of college football. What makes the most sense? What playoff format makes the most sense? Conference realignment. How do we govern that? How do we go through compliance and making sure that teams are NIL Go? You mentioned NIL Go, Ken. How do we make sure people are following the rules in NIL and there's not outside the revenue share payment true payments to athletes happening? I think that's where leadership comes in, and it's tough when you don't have a leader. I always think in leadership and running business. I mean, you guys both know this with your experience. Like, if there's not someone ultimately responsible, things fall through the cracks. If there's not someone who owns it, like, there's a lot of room for ambiguity in what actually in how processes happen and how things work operationally. And right now, there's a lot of ambiguity in who's actually running the show in college football. I think that needs to change. Well,
again, thank you so much for joining us on our show. It's been a really great having you. There's so much more that I'm sure we could talk about, and we'll do that next time. But again, Adam, thanks so much for joining, and have a great season this year.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
On behalf of our entire 76 Capital team, thank you for tuning in to this special college edition of our Sports Leadership Show. Please remember to subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast network or on the 76 Capital website. You can also explore the hundreds of episodes we've produced over the past several years on those same networks. And as always, go out there and make it happen.